Not looking at doing any sort of PowerPoint today, guys. I think this is more of a discussion and just an update and discussion because we have a few things going on, and we're hitting some major milestones here. So just a quick update on a few things, and then we'll jump into discussion items where would definitely like to hear your feedback. BEAD, we are moving through the process. Like we said last month, it's slow roll, but Colorado continues to try to stay ahead of the game, at least ahead of the ball in terms of getting moving through the NTIA's program or pre-approval so that we can get this money out the door as quickly as possible and into our communities to connect those that are unserved and underserved. So it's taken a couple years to get this point. We don't want to add more years to that. So anyway, so the BEAD challenge process continues along. Our staff is processing those. We're in the rebuttal phase of that process right now, and wrapping that up. The reason why it's taking a little while is because everybody always submits at the last minute, but that's okay because the deadline's still the deadline. But we're moving through that process quickly. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, can you give us a sense of the volume of rebuttals that you're dealing with?
We had 22,000 submissions, challenge submissions. So some of those were bulk challenges, uploads. So we're able to review those kind of in a big quantity, a large chunk. So it makes it a little bit easier. So that's how many we had. I know some states had a lot more. It just really depends on, their stakeholders and how they and who's engaged. I know some of the states received a lot of challenges, upwards in the hundreds of thousands. That wasn't our case, and honestly I didn't expect a significant number in challenges based on what we saw in the FCC's challenge process. So, and also in the challenge process for our various grant programs. So we feel like 22,000 is about what we thought it would be. Would love to have more, but doesn't mean people can't challenge the national broadband map. So we do encourage folks to do that on a continued basis if there's errors.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I know I said last month that we would have some sort of draft of the extremely high cost per location threshold and maybe some project areas high level. I did ask at the last meeting about, treating everybody the same or treating each region differently based on the cost estimates. And the group gave really good feedback about treat each area differently because the costs are different. Don't worry too much about treating everybody equal. It's really hard to do in a program like this, recognizing that costs vary across the state. But we are taking that approach. Some states are thinking about doing it's like polygon by polygon in terms of determining high costs. I will tell you that we are not doing that. So that would be very granular. And so we're still working on that. I need a little bit more time on what I can present to you all before I come back to the group. So we're probably looking at May, which in terms of the whole schedule for BEAD, I think dovetails real nicely because we really want to open up our public process for our project areas and our grant guidelines beginning in June at least. So that's kind of my target for how we're moving, and that assumes that we get approval from our for our initial proposal, as well as the results of our challenge process and getting approval from the NTIA on our data. So it's kind of a stacked process. So I'm trying to anticipate when we can move things forward. But it was a little premature to think that I could get that to you. Oh, the agenda changed. Okay. Get that to you at this meeting. So stay tuned. Go ahead, Ralph.
I was going to say, I thought Louisiana had an interesting approach. They were deferring on setting a threshold. They were really looking to get as many respondents as possible before determining where their threshold needed to be. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And we've discussed that. We said, okay, well, we should wait until we receive all the bids, right? But then, yes, that's one approach and it's very valid. We actually have some really good data from the Broadband Deployment Fund and also CPF on high costs based on the applicants that submitted. So we have some really good data coming from the various regions. we do have some preliminary data, and then obviously we're using a couple different data points to determine that. There are pros and cons with waiting and versus, kind of giving some people guidance up front. I really feel like for the Colorado Broadband Office, we do need to have some guidance up front in terms of how we communicate what those our expectations around the extremely high cost per location threshold and what we're thinking, just because, we might be able to stretch our dollars further if we give a little bit more guidance versus kind of just letting the market decide where it wants to go, which, the market can, of course, and we want to take that into consideration. So it's going to be more of like, here's some parameters, here's some guidance, here's what we're thinking out ahead. But before we send out those applications, and then, when we receive our applications, benchmarking that against what we thought those high cost per location thresholds are. We also need to understand that before we go into our program, because that'll determine our match waivers for BEAD. So doing it after the fact, it's a little bit of more of it's not a wrong way to do it. It's the most accurate way to do it, but I feel like our stakeholders are going to want to know, well, generally, what's the expectation around match waivers? What are the expectations around the technology mix in certain areas? We might say this is totally a fiber area. This is what the CBO wants, it's fiber in this part of the state. We can say that because what will happen is we don't say some of those things, then the fixed wireless carriers will bid on everything. And we might say, well, actually, we this is 100% fiber. We can get fiber over here versus, some sort of technology mix. I just would hate for people to waste their time on filling out applications on technology mix when we've already kind of predetermined it. But that's just an approach we're thinking about. And I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about waiting until, proposals are submitted versus kind of giving some guidance up front. So I'll stop there and see if anybody has some thoughts on that.
I guess it really just depends upon how good the data you have. If you have really good data, then that's what you can hold up to say that's why these thresholds are set where they are. That's why we've made the choices we have, is because we have all this good data. But I have no idea what data you have. So
yeah, we're still figuring out that too. We have a consultant on board to help us with some of that analysis, and we have recent bids on different applications as well to help benchmark a little bit. And again, we'll have some ideas here shortly, but yeah, I think you're right. I think how confident do we feel in the data? I think that's going to be something that comes up when we look at that.
okay, enough on this topic. I think I didn't want to drag that on.
No, you're fine. This is good. This is all great discussion, so I really appreciate it. Go ahead, Eric. Eric, you have your hand up. Did you mean to have your hand up? Nope. Okay. All right. So again, need a little bit. Go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead.
Randy, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just, in response to your question, I think your explanation of your approach sounds really sound. I will ask my members if they have any different thoughts, but I really appreciate your explanation of that one.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. And yeah, ask your members to see, if what there's out there. I mean, genuinely want to know, versus, doing, setting some guidelines and parameters up front versus waiting. Just, yeah, knowing what I'm thinking about that and trying to account for making the best use of people's time, because these applications are really expensive to put together. And I just feel like the more you guys have up front, the better proposals we'll get, and make sure they're aligned more with what we're thinking for the program. But obviously the best data is what you get after the fact too. So it's a balance. But let me know what your members say, because I really would be interested in hearing from them. Go ahead, Eric. Eric, do you have your hand up again?
Yeah, I don't think his sound is working. Eric, we can't hear you. You could always type it in too if you want to, Eric. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I don't know. Maybe we can keep moving along. We can come back to Eric whenever he figures out
Yeah.
what's going on with his audio. Okay. All right. So just another update. I said we have the CBO has selected, well, we have selected, we've gone through an RFP process for our bead vendor to help manage the program. And so, you know, just like we did for CPF, we hire out a lot of those expertise because you know, we have really great people in house, but you can't staff up for every single specialty that's needed to review applications. And so we'll make that announcement whenever whenever we wrap up their contracting. I'm hoping that we can get that wrapped up in the next 2 to 3 weeks because the deadlines will start occurring again in terms of how we execute the BEAD program based on our initial proposal volume 1. Where we are with our initial proposal volume 1, I don't have it on here. We expect to see an approval here pretty soon, first half of April. Again, we're trying to move this one along. And you know, we're feeling pretty good about the progress we've made. I know some states have published every iteration of every draft that they send to the NTIA through the curing process. You know, this came up the other day, and I just kind of want to let you guys know where my thought process was on this, because I know you guys have a lot of stakeholders that might be thinking about the same thing, or why did we do it? Why did we not do that? I will tell you, based on volume 1's cure process, it is it's a lot of sausage making, and the different versions are really confusing, even to staff. And so, and some of it's just wordsmithing as well. And not saying anything negative about the NTIA. They have a specific way of doing things, and I felt like in the cure process in particular, there wasn't a lot of value added to changing a sentence or moving sentences around. And so we just wanted to work off the one version of it, publish the public comments so you guys have what folks have said, and then you'll be able to see what we were able to include once all the sausage making is done. And so we're almost there. And we didn't have significant cures. There was a couple of really high level policy changes, but nothing major. So just a lot of detail, of course. And so I just want to let you know that's why we didn't publish every single version, because you would see literally like 4 or 5 drafts on our website, and that's a lot to track in a document that's over 150 pages long. So that's why we chose to do that. So if anybody asks you, we just wanted to make it clear and simple and easy for you guys to track what actually happened when it comes out. And so that's where we are with the yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think Eric called in on his phone and had his hand raised. So I don't know, Eric, if you still want to try to ask your question or your comment before you move on. Yeah. Maybe not.
Yeah, I know how that
Okay.
goes. It usually happens on a Monday in a very important meeting.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Sandra.
So since the broadband office was established or put together to do these grant programs, why or what will a consultant company be doing with the grant process?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Sandra. So the consulting company, they have a lot of their skills and capabilities include the review of network designs. A lot of these companies have, you know, network engineers on staff to help us assess, you know, the feasibility of a project, as well as making sure that all of the right components in a network design exist, so that when we do review these projects and make awards, that they're accurately designed. And so we don't have engineers at the broadband office to do that. And we would never hire broadband engineers to do that because we're a grant making agency. And so we decided to, you know, farm that stuff out, you know, farm it out. The other thing that we have too, which is great, is with some of these consultants, is they're really well versed in all of the compliance matters that folks have to adhere to. We are as well. I mean, we know the rules and we know the policies, but the consultants will help us on the implementation side of that. The other piece of that is, they're going to help us develop our grant guidelines based on all the documents that are floating out there with the NTIA, bring it all into one concise, cohesive document that's easy for people to use. And so they do that as well. They also, in terms of the financial viability of broadband networks, we have a lot of folks on these consulting teams that have the capabilities to assess, rate structures, rate cards, performas, OpEx, CapEx. The other thing too is they have the ability to, I know you'll definitely be interested to review all of the applications so that, they're meeting all the labor standards that the federal government has. So they'll be reviewing all those reports that the ISPs will have to submit with their application to make sure they are tracking or at least upholding the laws and policies that are in the program. And it's a lot of work. I mean, you're talking about $826.5 million worth of work. Even the capital projects funds, we did that with Tilson. They reviewed all of that. The other thing too is they also have the ability to review data. We have our own broadband mapping data as well. But they can take it a step further and really dig down into the details and assess every single location that people are requesting money for to make sure, number one, it's not overlap, and that, understanding the technology in the field. So there's a lot of details that, in the broadband space that, we would contract out to do, because we're more on the program side. We can administer the program, but we have to have those subject matter experts when it comes to the review of applications against very technical details in these applications. So we just went through that with DPF, and it's very technical. And then for the broadband deployment fund, I know we don't have a consultant per se doing that same work, but staff has been reviewing those projects over the years, and we want to make sure that we get we're more accurate. We become more accurate in our assessment of applications as well too. I know on the broadband deployment fund, we've had to claw back some awards over the years because of overlap, for example, and if we just had a little bit more extra capacity, maybe we could have prevented some of that by having some of the network and not data mapping, but just the assessment of locations and technology in the field. So we're doing that as well. The other thing too is our consultant can go out in the field based on what applicants submit and do field audits to make sure that we're awarding funds appropriately and being the best fiduciaries of limited taxpayer resources. So we were able to do that in the CPF. We had our engineers go out and look at some of the projects to make sure that what was said in the application was correct. And so we were able to remove some locations from funding because some of it wasn't accurate because we had those expertise. So I know that's a long answer, but there's a lot behind reviewing those applications, and we want to make sure we have the best experts to help us.
Okay, so they'll also be charged with whether a high cost area would use fiber versus using fixed wireless.
That's right. So the efficiency piece is part of that as well. And when we got into that with CPF, where so for example, some networks are more expensive to build. We really tested that and said, okay, well, and some of the projects were just way too expensive, and we thought that they weren't as efficient as they could be. And there was some redundant infrastructure proposed in some of those applications that, a seasoned network engineer would know. And so, yes, it's all of the above. So we want to make sure we do it right and we do it well with the BEAD program.
Okay, thank you for that.
All right.
Hear me now?
Okay, so yeah, go
Yes.
ahead, Eric.
Oh, yeah, thanks. My computer just, no matter what I did, decided the microphone wasn't going to work today. So I've been following along, although I keep ducking out. So, but going back to the original thing I was going to comment on, yeah, I think I agree with Ralph. It depends on what data you've collected. Going back to that a little bit, I think you could guide what kind of applications you get, although those you may, as you say, you just mentioned, network engineers being part of all these different organizations that are going to be putting together project proposals. So you may get some of your most accurate information on how much it's actually going to cost to get to these addresses from those applications. But it seems like some level of threshold may be needed just to kind of guide the actual applicants of what ones you're kind of saying this is too much. If it's this much per address, then don't really, like, you could tell us it so we know, but I mean we're that's not really what we're focusing on. Like, I don't know if that's $50,000 an address or per passing or $100,000, but I mean you just can't spend all of your money on a handful of addresses. So there's got to be something you can, kind of give some guidelines. But to find out where those really high cost areas are, you may have to depend on the responses, unless you really have a good idea where those are now. And I doubt that CPF gave you enough data to do that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's a combination of both, right? And where we kind of bridge the gap in terms of the data is, the actual bids. Like we have a pretty good idea of the cost per location threshold in different parts of the state. So that guidance is pretty straightforward. And I think to your point, Eric, for those areas where we don't have good accounting for, maybe there's some sort of, we set some high level guidance on that region, or whatever unit of measure we use, and we say here's what we think is the high cost per location threshold, and then have some exceptions based on what's submitted, and have some further analysis after that. But I do think that giving people some sense of what we're doing and predictability would really help. But have some caveat to that too, because we don't want to deter people from applying if they can achieve a lesser cost per location. We want to maximize our dollars, and so that's kind of what we're thinking. But yeah, I agree. And CPS, like, we were able to get some good data, right? But it's not every region of the state. And we can go back and look at all the applicants, 112 that submitted, and get some good data to the extent that some of the applications are complete. But yeah, I think it's a combination of both. Okay. All right, so moving along, because I want to spend some time on the discussion items here. All right, we had our Digital Equity Act allocation announcement from the NTIA last week. The first tranche of money is around $12 million, and then we'll receive different tranches of money. The allocation, I think, it's 60, 20, 20. In terms of the year 6, 7, 8, 9, yeah. So 60, we get 60% of our money, and then 20%, and then 20% of our allocation. We have to, and I don't know, I have to go back and look, but we're not getting all of our money up front. We were slated to receive around $21 million, but it'll come in tranches that the state has to apply for each year. So the NTIA will be issuing NOFOs for each one of those cycles for funding, and then each cycle will have its own performance period. So there's some discussion amongst the states about how efficient is that approach. You could just say, here's one NOFO for the Digital Equity Act money, and just set a performance period for just that one NOFO, but they decided to break it up. So don't know the rationale there, but that's okay. We'll just kind of stay in line and do what the NTIA wants us to do with that. But it is exciting. We did submit our digital equity plan, and we're under review right now. So hopefully we'll get that approved soon. I know other states have made announcements about getting their plans approved. Ours took a little bit longer because we had to get through OIT procurement. So, but we're tracking pretty well on that, and hopefully we'll be able to make grants here pretty soon. So that's that on the BEAD front. As you guys know, the Affordable Connectivity Program, last month, money's running out. No indication of any renewal or re-up or reallocation or appropriation. from our perspective, we think this is pretty unfortunate, given all the efforts that are underway to connect people. And even when you talk about the Digital Equity Act allocations, when people can't even afford to connect to the internet, I don't know, it undermines your digital navigator programs and devices and everything else that's required to help folks. So we're really disappointed that this didn't happen. And there's really, for the state to fund it, we just can't afford to fund it at the level that the feds were. So it's really interesting because it had bipartisan support. So anyway, we'll keep you posted on anything that happens, but we've been tracking this program in the succession of the program, or not succession, but at least the re-upping of the program. And unfortunately, there's just nothing out there that has given us any hope that it'll continue. So yeah, no money is allocated to the ACP, Sandra. Not in our programs, and not anything that I know of the feds. I think they just passed the latest budget at the congressional level, and it didn't include any funding for the ACP. Yes, Jeff, the Digital Equity Act, the Digital Access Plan is available to the public. Hey, Lauren, can you pop over and drop a link in the chat for Jeff?
Yeah,
Me,
sure.
real quickly.
Thank you.
Go
I
go
forgot.
ahead,
I just can't keep track of them all. Thank
Oh,
you.
it's okay. There's a lot. That's why we didn't publish all the drafts, because it's there's just too many out there for sure. Go ahead, Eric.
Have you guys? I think I heard that you mentioned my name since I am Amanda, but on that ACP program, since that was a requirement to participate by the ISPs that were awarded CPF grants, is there any guidance that you're giving to the applicants that won about that? Obviously, there's no program to comply with there if it's ending this month. Is there still a requirement that they comply with the potential follow-on that would start later? Or are they kind of just up in the air about that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and it's something that we're accounting for. So, for the ACP, regardless of whether the feds fund it or not, ISPs will have a requirement to make available a low-cost plan, low-cost option. So that'll be a requirement of our funding. In CPF, because obviously everybody signed a grant agreement that says that. Well, they are signing them, but that is still an expectation of federal funding that will not change. What it looks like on the state side could be different. I know we're looking at our high cost support, or our broadband deployment fund, sunset review and grant guidelines, but on the Fed side, that's a requirement. It's not going to change.
So they're still
So-
required to provide what they would qualify as a low cost protection plan, but is that kind of up to them then to determine what that is? Or because if you're part of the ACP program, it also included some reimbursement from the feds on that, right? So obviously that could change the numbers quite a bit for them of what they can afford to do as far as a low cost plan.
Yeah, so the feds are pretty prescriptive, and you'll see in our version of the volume 2, which will hopefully get approved here soon, that they outlined what the expectation was for the replacement of the affordability connectivity program. So there are standards. ISPs don't just get to pick whatever they want for the feds. And so there'll be a requirement. But the subsidies and reimbursements, that's something that the ISP is going to have to deal with. If there's no subsidies, then there's no subsidies that the feds have. So, but the requirements are still the same, regardless of the subsidy or not. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I just don't know if all the ISPs, hopefully they understood that, but because kind of sounds suspiciously like an unfunded mandate if that's the direction that they go with that.
I wouldn't say it's an unfunded mandate, because it's a requirement of the grant program. So how it gets funded, is how it. We don't really, as a state, have any discretion over how it gets funded. So, but I do know those subsidies are running out. So, but it is a requirement. And the ISPs who sign those agreements, we have a whole list of agreements and the grant guidelines and everything else. They need to understand what they're signing up for with the Fed. We don't want to deter people, but this is a huge, affordability is one of the major pillars of broadband adoption. So, and we did some analysis in 2022. It represents a little under half of why people can't connect to the internet. So it's really important, and it's something that we're gonna lean in on as CBO as a requirement. For over the long term, because it's part of our strategy. It's very important, and how it gets funded. I know it's been great with the ACP, but it's still a requirement regardless of where the funding comes from. So it's a standard for the program. So yeah, it's a bummer that it's going away, but doesn't mean that it can't resurface again. The ACP, it just at this time it just isn't an option going forward.
Yeah, it
Okay.
sounds like the case. I guess a little bit to that point though, and this maybe kind of even go towards some of the high cost funding considerations. I wonder if you guys are making too. But one of the things that oftentimes doesn't get looked at is not just the capital expense of building to unserved locations, and the more rural and the more less dense you get, that's going to cost more, and the more obstacles there are to overcome as far as construction, but that also increase operational cost. And we should want them to be able to be successful. They need to be able to actually make a go of running these networks over the long term. And so my understanding of that CBF requirement was more that you will comply, or you will be a part of the ACP program, which did include some reimbursement. So if we're suddenly saying that, $30 per household is not, you still have to provide that same level of low cost offering, but not with any reimbursement, then that really may blow up a lot of numbers. So I really hope that was explicit if I was an applicant, that I noticed that, because operational costs, they sometimes are looking at a pretty low margins, and that could really blow that up, and that's not going to make for very good sustainability itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And operationally want networks to be viable, but and I don't, and I know I know the delineation between OpEx and CapEx, but this theory of subsidizing, CapEx to the tune of $1 billion for the state of Colorado, we're hoping that with that type of $1 billion subsidy, that we're buying down those costs, those upfront costs to build a network, so that you can be viable in those areas that are the most expensive to serve over time. And so since the state and the federal government are literally taking care of $1 billion of capital investment, that should be favorable to your books, not negative. And so we think that if we're subsidizing to the tune of $1 billion, that affordability piece is what we kind of get on. We get two things. We get affordability for residents, and we also get connectivity for those that the business case wasn't there to make any investment. And so whereas I hear what you're saying with the OpEx piece, we want these ISPs to be operationally solvent, yes. But the idea is that we're making these ISPs more solvent by investing $1 billion in infrastructure, so that we can, so we're not passing that off to the consumer, and getting people connected. So we are still subsidizing. It just isn't on the operational side of things. It's on the capital side, which is sometimes even more expensive than the operational side of things. So we're hoping that makes a big difference in the affordability and the connectivity piece that we're trying to achieve. All right, so moving along, so if we hear anything on ACP, we'll let you know. And if you guys hear anything about ACP, let us know. Moving on to capital projects, I won't spend too much time here, but we were able to, through our challenge and appeals process, award 5 new grants. The appeals and challenge process is open for the 5 new grants that we awarded. And so, you know, we're running that process again. So I encourage you to share those with your networks to make sure that we're awarding applicants so that we're not experiencing any overlap. So that's available right now. When I go to the website, I think it closes this week, the challenge process. But anyway, that's where we are with CPF. Grant agreements have been sent out, or they're going to be sent out here pretty shortly to those that are the green light list, not necessarily supplemental awards. Those are a two-step process. But again, the challenge process is really important to the CBO, and I just want to underscore that because it helps us get the money where it should go to unserved and underserved locations. So there's always going to be overlap. It's nobody's fault. It's just part of the nature of the beast. But we use this process to really help us direct funds so that we're not duplicating efforts. Like I said, really excited. The construction season, it doesn't feel like it's still wintry here in Colorado, but we're getting these. Hopefully everybody will be under contract here in the next 30 to 45 days so that we can get the dollars flowing out to these ISPs and folks who have applied to make the best use of the construction season. So overall capital projects fund we thought was a successful process. There's a few lessons learned that we're going to apply to BEAD. But we think that that process was a great model to replicate and tweak and improve upon all of our grant programs. All right, any questions on the updates before we hop into discussion? Okay, so I want to start with Ralph. I know you requested an agenda item for the discussion. Do you want to kind of key this up to have a conversation? Because I want to get to yours first, and if we run out of time for everything else, it's fine. But I want to make sure that we get to your topic.
Well, thank you. No, it's just been a topic that's come up repeatedly in terms of areas where they made an effort to try and get funding for middle mile projects that are necessary in their region through the NTIA middle mile, program. But for whatever reason, we're unable to secure that funding and now have a pretty significant hole they have to fill to try and build out that middle mile, which if you don't have that middle mile, then all the investment you're making in the last mile is not necessarily going to pay off. And so we had talked about this early on in terms of being an agenda item, and I just thought, maybe I could put it back on the agenda to sort of find out what the current thinking is in terms of, trying to fill some of that middle mile hole.
Yeah, no, and I vaguely remember that too. I think we were going to put it on the agenda, Ralph, so I apologize if it fell off the radar. We do have a gap. And maybe what I can do, if you're okay, because let's put this on the next agenda and we can do a full presentation with CBO's approach. Is that helpful? Would that be good if we kind of spend a little bit more time on it?
Well, I think it's a lengthy conversation, so it would be good to have the time to do that. And also if, it would give you time to prepare to present what your thinking is, so that we can have a useful conversation.
Okay. So what we'll do in May is I'll put it on the agenda for May and we'll dedicate at least maybe 50% of our time dedicated to it. Because actually, and the timing might be really good because we have a couple of proposals going through the legislative process right now and budget process, Ralph. And once those are approved, we'll have a better sense of like, hey, this is actually going to happen. And here's some thoughts around that. So, and we have a couple of other efforts underway with this. And I talk a little bit about it with the CDOT CBO process improvement discussion. So we're folding that into the middle mile conversation because we have a funding, we have a couple of issues with middle mile in the state. It's funding, so we don't have any money for it. There's a lack of infrastructure, which to your point really crippled last mile deployment. And we also have a process issue with the state where it's really hard to get through the process to access middle mile and where we have it. And so we're looking at the three-prong approach in terms of how do we make middle mile work better for the state of Colorado. There's a couple of models out there that we're looking at, and we started having those conversations. We've spent a lot of time on the ledge session, so we want to be able to look at the three issues that we have, and there could be more. I would say stakeholdering is another one. We want to make sure that what we're doing is we engage our stakeholders on, instead of kind of developing policies and process behind closed doors. We want to work for stakeholders. We might be missing something, so there's a little bit of that too. But we'll be able to focus a lot of effort on that over the summer, on how do we make the best proposal to our stakeholders, so the governor's office, the state legislature, JTC, on how to fix our middle mile problem. It requires a little bit more study. But I would love to bring to you guys what we're thinking in our approach and get some ideas. You discuss some ideas for how we go about it over the next several months. So let me bring that back to you in May, after everything's been approved, and get your eyes on it. Great. So Matt, do you have something?
Yeah, I just want to really highlight that stakeholder process too as well, just because there are our initiatives here in Region 9 as well as Region 10 of our middle mile work. So I really don't want to reinvent the wheel here, or maybe we can coordinate and partner together, whatever that is, because, you know, recently we're looking into some funding requests too as well on expanding our middle mile, contributing to the Alpine Loop, and being able to have that. So, you know, I really encourage OIT CBO to reach out to Region 9 and 10 and any other regions that are already working on this.
Yeah, so we're in conversation. Yeah, and thanks. I should say Commissioner Falca. Yeah, so thanks for that. We are actually, I think the stakeholdering piece is critical, because we do have different regions doing their own thing, and how do we incorporate that into our statewide middle mile strategy, because it's part of our ecosystem, and we need to include you guys. And I've been talking to Region 10 as well on how we go about it. And I do think that our best approach is to all work together on it. And that's why I threw the fourth one in there is stakeholdering, because we have 9, we have 10, we also have SCED. Now we have a couple of others that are coming online, and we have everybody on this call and all their stakeholders trying to solve for it. So I feel like we're all kind of on this hamster wheel of like no end in sight. And I want to get to a solution, but I think it's going to take us all working together to do it. And so I have some ideas on that as well. So maybe the next meeting, I think we should spend some time, a significant amount of time on that, and we can put together a full proposal for you guys.
Thank you.
Ralph, anything else on that? Okay. So there's two things that I want to try to spend a little bit of time on. So the FCC RDOF and CAF2 amnesty filing, the CBO did file comment last week on this, and our position has been to encourage the FCC to grant a temporary period amnesty for the recipients in those programs. This program is a big deal for us. And I linked the letter that we filed with the FCC. I will tell you that I don't know if this is the right format, because it's a little confusing and their system is pretty, I don't know, but I'm sure you guys have, some of you have filed on the FCC side. It's a little interesting, but anyway, this is what we said to Chairwoman Rosenforcel. And we have 7 RDOF awards, totaling 40,000 locations. And we have 3 companies that have defaulted. And in the remaining locations that we have that should be connected are around 29,000 locations, which is a big deal. It doesn't get us to 100% if we have our defaults. I'll stop there. Go ahead, Jeff. Do you want to ask a question?
I may be asking the obvious question, but did you express an opinion in that on whether or not those receiving amnesty should be able to apply for BEAD. And we don't have an opinion. I'm just curious what yours might be.
Yeah, my opinion is yes. So here's the thing. We had this happen in CPS. We had an ISP that had really great projects proposed in parts of Colorado that are really unserved. And the federal requirement is if you defaulted on any awards for federal funding for 3 years, you're ineligible for any more federal funding. And it kicked them out of the eligibility criteria. They were no longer eligible, but their applications were actually really good. And the reason they defaulted, I mean, is neither here nor there, but if we're trying to get to 100% universal coverage, I think that we need to be thinking about those ISPs that could be ineligible because of the defaults. Now, I'm not saying that, you should file for bankruptcy and be able to get $1 million worth of credit in 12 months. I'm not saying that, but I also think that we need to look at that in terms of our long-term goals of universal coverage. And so, that's our position as well. Like if you get amnesty, it's not saying you're defaulting. Okay, I don't want your eligibility to be impacted because you're seeking amnesty. Our goal is to relinquish those awards so that we can make those locations available for BEAD and all the other programs, because if they're not eligible in BEAD, they won't be eligible in the Broadband Deployment Fund because we're talking about the same location. And if these companies can't serve, we don't want to wait till 2028 or 2030 to figure it out. Like we want to be able to serve people now. So that's our position. The other position too, just so you know, is, and this is a long shot, is for those ISPs that are relinquishing their awards, we would like the FCC to reallocate those monies back to the state so that we can grant them out in our BEAD programs, because it impacted our allocation of funding. We would have received a lot more money if those locations were available. And so we would love to see that money come back to the state, not go back to the FCC to set up another RDOF 2.0 or 3.0. We want those funds in our state. We just want to be able to manage it on behalf of the FCC a little bit better. And there's companies that are building out. So, we don't want to penalize those guys for doing what they said they were going to do. So there has to be some sort of balance between those that are actually fulfilling the commitment and those that need a waiver. But those are our positions. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you.
I can agree with those positions, especially since I think RDOF, the way that it was structured, being a reverse auction and a race to the bottom, all that, didn't really provide a lot of funding for a per address level build. And so the structural components of it certainly could have some good applicants that just aren't able to complete it, especially with the fact that it didn't really fully fund a build out anyway. You needed other help to do that, or loans or something, and then the costs have gone way up since that was first put out. So, and I think you're right as far as focusing on opening those areas up, that they should not be blocked out from BEAD or any other, both CAF2 and RDOF areas should not be ineligible for the areas that they are not intending to build to. The areas that they're still intending to build, we're just talking about the ones that have pulled out or defaulted. Is that correct?
Yeah. We're talking about those ones. So we've had the 3 that have defaulted. They've gone through the process.
Mm-hmm.
And we have more that haven't. Some have made progress, and most of our RDOF awards haven't made any progress yet. So, and we have a small number of CAF2 recipients. It's not a lot, but every location.
Yeah, that's
counts.
kind of old.
And so,
And
yeah, it's old.
at this point, I think what was the last CAF2 period was like 2021 or something like that. But
No, I think it was
as far as when
after
it was
that.
supposed to be completed by, but
Yeah. Well, either way, I think that it needs to be addressed, and I think the structuring of the RDOF program in particular was problematic to its success. And I don't think ISPs, in the state should be be held, those locations should be tied up because the program, I can't find anybody that's like, yeah, this was a well-structured program. Like, you know, I just don't want to penalize our ISPs and our communities for something that really probably missed the mark in many ways. And I don't want to prevent ISPs from participating in future programs because of a program that, you know, we didn't really have good structure to. So that's kind of
wholeheartedly
where we are.
agree with
Yeah.
that. And I was going to, add to that what you're saying. It wasn't a very well structured program. I don't think CAF2 was either. They were both building to a minimum that had already passed, and that race to the bottom reverse auction. I don't think they're seeing good results. So the other thing, hopefully, that CBO might, if you have the same position, can express is that they would quit trying to do those as a mechanism for deploying funds, because they obviously are not effective or efficient. And so I hope that they're just done. There's no RDOF round 2, because it was obviously round 1 was not a success, or won't be a success either. It's just an impediment to progress as far as I can tell. And to your point about the monies, I think that's a great idea. Maybe you could even like put that in a chest to start the nascent middle mile fund or something like that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the thought process for us. And so yeah, we'll see where the FCC lands. I'm hoping that they land on the right side of this. And the other thing, and back to Jeff's point, I think I put in the letter about not penalizing those in amnesty. I'm trying to look through it, but it might be in there. But anyway, if not, we can certainly make that known to folks as well. I know we're at time, we're 3 minutes over, and of course we didn't get to everything on the discussion list, but it's not, some of this stuff isn't really, I wouldn't say none of it. Some of it's not super urgent, it's just more ideas that I can bring back to you at the next meeting. So if I'm hearing you guys right, let's spend some time on middle mile, the state's middle mile approach, especially going into summer, and recognizing that we need to figure out the best approach and make it work once we get approval for all the proposals that CBO has going through the process. And then for discussion, I'll put these back on here. And then anything else, if you guys have anything you want to discuss, or you have questions about, Ralph, you did great, send us a note. I'm happy to discuss anything that is important to your stakeholders or you yourself. So anything else for the order? Eric, I know you had your hand up again. Did you have anything else?
No, I think I just forgot to put it down.
Okay. Good. All right. Anything else before we sign off to give you guys back? We'll give you guys, going too much over, but to give you guys back your day. All right. So we're slated for May, and hopefully we'll have some more updates on all things BEAD and everything else. But I'm really, I'd appreciate all your feedback. It's always really helpful. So I know this is a newer group and we're figuring out what type of role we're all playing here, but so far so good, and definitely want to spend some more time on discussion. We'll bring some of these things back, and you guys enjoy the rest of your April, and we'll see you soon. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you.